So there's been quite a bit of stuff going on in the BBC here in the UK, 13th of March 2023. This is a quick bit of context. Gary Lineker is to return to Match of the Day. Now, if you're not aware, Gary Lineker is a very famous footballer here in the UK. He's now much older and he hosts a programme called Match of the Day, which is on every Saturday evening and every Sunday. I don't think he does Sundays, but he does the main show on Saturday evenings where they go through all of the soccer, for you Americans, soccer, football, all the football matches in the top league here in the UK. Now, what's happened here is that Gary Lineker tweeted, let me just go to here. The row began last week when, in a tweet, Lineker said the government's new illegal migration bill was an immeasurably cruel policy, and he said the language used around it was not dissimilar to that used by Germany in the 1930s. Now, the BBC has this rule about impartiality, but Gary Lineker is not a newscaster. Gary Lineker is a sports presenter, and that's where everything starts getting up in the air with this. Lineker was told on Friday to step back from presenting Match of the Day this weekend just gone, until an agreement was reached. It triggered an unprecedented wave of walkouts from fellow pundits and commentators in solidarity. That led to football coverage across the BBC being completely annihilated. So, the BBC has decided that Gary Lineker will return to present Match of the Day after he was taken off air because he criticised the government's new asylum policy. But the BBC continues to face criticism from a range of sides. Every aspect of criticism is being thrown at them, despite them bringing Gary Lineker back. So there's the Tory MPs that are rah, 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 rah. He doesn't like our policy, therefore we think the BBC should get rid of him. And Labour is saying that Gary Lineker is showing the proper principles that British people should have, which is exactly what you'd expect. There's this guy called Davey. I think he's the chair of the BBC, and he's got his own problems to do with impartiality. Because of Boris Johnson, the ex-Prime Minister, where he brokered an £800,000 guaranteed loan for him. Something like that. I could have got that slightly wrong. But Davey insisted the decision to pull Lineker off air was about buying some time until the two sides could come to an agreement over his political tweets. And he said that was exactly what had happened. They didn't back down. They'd just had a chat. For some people, we've taken too severe action. Others think we're being too lenient. We're talking about polarisation here. This is Gary Lineker now. That's not a very good tweet, very good photo of him. He's a really good-looking bloke, but he looks more like Michael Gove there. Not a very good photo at all, but that's Gary Lineker. I've said that before. Mark Chapman, who was another of the BBC's commentators, pundits, frontmen, newscasters for football or sport, it had been miserable and difficult for the staff involved, and it was disgusting and unfair that the staff who did work on the weekend received abuse. Polarisation all over again. Everybody has to stand with Gary Lineker and get out. But you lot who actually went to work, you might not be earning very much, you should have walked out as well. You could have lost your job, but we don't care. You should have walked out. He added, it is ironic, in a row over impartiality, we have all been seen to be taking sides. And I feel there are lessons to be learned by all involved. This is absolutely true. Everybody has been taking sides. It should never have got to where it got to in the first place, but it got there because the government decided it didn't like that somebody on the BBC then went on Twitter and said they didn't like their policies. And frankly, Gary Lineker likened them to 1930s Germany, which is never a good idea. It's never a good argument, but he did it, and so what? And he's not backing down. He says the language was likened to 1930s Germany. He wasn't saying the people were like that. He said the language was like that. After announcing he would return to presenting on BBC TV, Lineker tweeted, "However difficult the last few days have been, it simply doesn't compare to having to flee your home from persecution or war to seek refuge in a land far away. We remain a country of predominantly tolerant, welcoming and generous people." Bit of context again. BBC employees are expected to remain impartial on political matters and must follow strict social media guidelines. But there's significant debate about how they should apply to staff outside of news. Now, this is a really interesting aspect. It's this outside of news bit, because that's been one of the big arguments to do with Gary Lineker. He's not part of the news team. But BBC employees, he's also not an employee. He's a contractor. He's independent. So it's all a bit up in the air. But this particular sentence hits on the next story, which came out today. Fiona Bruce. Fiona Bruce is the head of what is Question Time. She leads the panel. It's always politicians or well-known people, 4 or 5 of them, with her in the middle, mediating a debate around political subjects. So this person on Question Time is right in the middle of politics. She must remain completely impartial. She is to step back from refuge after a storm over a Stanley Johnson remark on Question Time. That's Fiona Bruce. That's not a good photo either. She's actually a really stunning older woman. Around about 50, I would say, maybe 45, maybe 55. I don't know which, but she's very, very good looking. She presents Question Time and the Antiques Roadshow on the BBC. The Question Time host, Fiona Bruce, says she will step back from her role as an ambassador for the domestic violence charity Refuge, following a comment she made on air about Stanley Johnson. Now, the thing is about this domestic violence charity Refuge is that it is aimed at women being beaten by their husbands. Now, everybody can be against that. Everybody should be against it. The question is, because there's no connection to domestic violence committed by women against men around this, should the BBC Question Time host be an ambassador for this charity? I can see it's a really good thing to be involved in. I completely agree with her. I have no issue with her. It's an issue about the BBC. They've got a problem with this term, impartiality, because how far do you take it? But the problem she is having is following a comment she made on air about Stanley Johnson. Now, Stanley Johnson is the father of our ex-Prime Minister, Boris Johnson. Yes, that person. The presenter faced a criticism after stepping in when Johnson, the father of former Prime Minister Boris, was described as a wife-beater on last Thursday's episode of Question Time. Bruce interjected, telling viewers, "Just so everyone knows what this is referring to, Stanley Johnson's ex-wife spoke to a journalist, Tom Bauer, and she said that Stanley Johnson had broken her nose and she'd ended up in hospital as a result. Stanley Johnson has not commented publicly on that. Friends of his have said it did happen. It was a one-off." Now, that is the comment that she made. Her comments were criticised by the charity Women's Aid, who called them unnecessary and irresponsible. We know at Women's Aid that domestic abuse is rarely, if ever, a one-off, with the vast majority of abuse being a pattern of behaviour. I can fully accept that. I fully accept that they are not happy with this, especially given the statement that was made. Announcing her decision to stand down from being ambassador to Refuge on Monday, Bruce said, "Last week on Question Time, I was required to legally contextualise a question about Stanley Johnson. Those words have been taken as an expression of my own opinions, which they are absolutely not, and taken as my minimising domestic abuse, which I would never do. I have been a passionate advocate and campaigner for all survivors of domestic abuse, and have used my privileged position as a woman in the public eye to bring this issue to the fore, notably in my work for over 25 years with Refuge. Ding ding, impartiality. Question mark. If you're with the BBC, fronting news and politics stuff, should you be allowed to do this? I don't know. I'm just raising the question because it's all in the public eye. But following the events of last week, I have faced a social media storm, much of which mischaracterised what I said and took the form of personal abuse directed at me. I think I've missed the bit somewhere where it says that it wasn't her words. Now, I did say it. Those words have been taken as an expression of my own opinions, which they are absolutely not. She was required to legally contextualise a question. I'm wondering whether she got given the words in her ear maybe, or something quickly came up on her iPad which said, these are the words we need you to say. Now, what this shows, what this particular issue shows, is that Fiona Bruce has found out that being an ally is one of the hardest, least beneficial, least justifiable, philosophically terrible positions to ever be in. As an ally, you must always say exactly what the other people want. And that's where Fiona Bruce has got her problem here. And this is where people throughout the public sector, throughout society, do not understand. This is what they don't understand about being an ally. Being an ally is the worst position you can ever be in. In Fiona Bruce's case, her only way of maintaining the position that she was in, being an ambassador for Refuge, was to be a fundamentalist, an ideologist, covering it. There is no way that she could say those things on the BBC because she would be thrown under the bus, despite the fact she had to say them because she was working for the BBC. The question is, should she ever have been in the position by being allowed to be an ambassador for Refuge if she is somebody that works for the BBC? So she has realised that being an ally, you can very, very quickly be thrown under the bus at any point. Any point. Especially if you work for the BBC in the role that she has, which is a very, very well-known top-level role. And she's actually brilliant at it. She's superb, one of the best presenters that I know. I don't actually know her, just from watching the TV. Okay, so that's impartiality. Let's have a look at something else. This a lady called Caroline Flack. Her mother doesn't accept the Metropolitan Police apology after Caroline Flack committed suicide. I think this is her. I don't know anything about her at all. The mother of Caroline Flack says she rejects an apology given by the Met Police about how her daughter's case was handled. Caroline Flack was a TV star. She was facing prosecution for assaulting her boyfriend when she killed herself in February 2020. She had been due to appear in court over the alleged assault of her then boyfriend Lewis Burton in the weeks before her death. Following her arrest, the Crown Prosecution Service initially decided Caroline only receive a caution. Now, what's a caution? A caution is a warning. It's a police warning. A police warning that you cannot do this again. A police warning where the person who receives the caution accepts their guilt. So she was originally only going to get a caution for assaulting her boyfriend. I don't know what happened. All I'm doing is reading this. This decision was appealed by a senior Met officer and resulted in Caroline Flack instead facing a criminal charge of assault by beating. After her suicide, a coroner later ruled the presenter killed herself because she knew she was facing prosecution and feared the publicity a trial would attract. Following her death, the Independent Office for Police Conduct carried out a review of the Met's decision to charge her. The review did not identify any misconduct by the Met. However, the IOPC did ask the Met to apologise to Caroline's family about not recording its reason to appeal the original CPS decision. So the CPS decides she only gets a caution. It was appealed by a senior Met officer because it was an assault by beating, and that resulted in the CPS going back against their own caution decision and deciding it would be a charge of assault. So the Met has asked the IOPC has asked the Met to apologise for not recording its reason why it appealed the original decision. I find that a bit strange that the IOPC would ask that in any way, shape or form. There should be no reason to do that. They found that there was criminal activity had been undertaken. The guy had been beaten up, and instead of receiving a caution, the police wanted to charge her with a criminal assault. And following the IOPC asking the Met to apologise, the Met did apologise for not officially recording it. Christine, her mother, has previously said her daughter had been treated differently because of her fame. Really? I thought there was one law for all. If you beat the shit out of somebody, you get charged. That's the mother, apparently. When asked if she thought her daughter would still be alive if the caution had remained and Caroline had not been charged with a criminal offence, Christine told Newsnight, "I do, I really do." "Okay, but the caution means she actually did it." The Met Police felt that wasn't a strong enough deterrent, so they decided to charge her. Whether there was anything at all to do with how famous this person was, I have no idea. I cannot tell. But I've got no problem with somebody committing a criminal act being charged. She lost her job straight away without even being found guilty or going to court. She had another series axed. Well, what should we think about? General cancel culture in the general society, particularly of men or of anybody that says something that somebody else doesn't like on the internet. People losing their jobs because of something somebody has said about them. Criminal charges being laid against somebody and it has an impact on your life. You end up, everybody thinks you're guilty merely because criminal charges have been laid. That's not true. Innocent until proven guilty, but this again shows the polarisation within society. Complete polarisation. But what we're talking about here is the ability to deal with charges, especially if This whole thing suggests that she knew she was guilty. She had accepted a caution. Her mother had said, if she had had the caution, everything would have been all right. I really believe that. But the Met decided they didn't want just a caution. They felt it was bad enough to actually bring a case. A caution already admits guilt. So when her mum says, without even being found guilty, this is one of those situations of innocent until guilty, and yet, there's already something there about guilt because of the caution. Losing another series. You know, this reminds me of Johnny Depp. Johnny Depp was accused by his ex-wife of beating her, being a domestic violence deliverer, shall we say. Somebody who was domestically violent against his wife. And it turns out, even after going through a UK court case, which decided to accept his wife's lies and accepted everything that she said and found him guilty, he then took her to court for defamation in America, and a proper court case, which went on for a long time, found that she was the abuser and she was the defamer in general. I think there was one little aspect of the Johnny Depp case where he was found guilty of something. Okay, so she commits suicide because of something that, according to this, having received a caution, or being able to receive a caution because she accepted that she'd done it, she committed suicide because the police decided that wasn't strong enough and it needed to go to court. She was worried about the impact on her own life of her decisions. Personal responsibility, personal accountability. She chose one of the most horrible ways out. Yes, a really bad situation. Bad that she committed suicide. The question is whether she could have got over it. She'd already lost her job. She'd been axed from her series. A new series that was coming up. People did not want to work with her anymore. She would have had to slither back into the general average person's life. She might have had to move home, move up north, or move to a different country and just start all over again as a standard person without being in the headlines anywhere, somewhere that nobody knew her, and just live her life. And she could have eventually accepted she had done wrong and she shouldn't have done it, and she got her comeuppance from the court case, whatever the result would have been. Or maybe she'd have won her court case and she'd have been found that it was all false, it was all lies, and she would have walked away with her head held high, and she could do what Johnny Depp did and get back into it. Maybe, who knows? But she took this other way out, and her mum is now trying to blame other people. I don't find that acceptable. The people that the senior Met officer that appealed this decision, they were right. They had the right to appeal it. They did appeal it. And they did absolutely nothing wrong other than recording the reason why they appealed the original CPS decision. But appealing CPS decisions is what happens all the time. Okay, let's have a look at this one. This is the last one. Eleanor Williams. A sentencing of a lady called Eleanor Williams. Men tried to take their own lives over her rape lies. That's Eleanor Williams. She was found guilty of 8 counts of perverting the course of justice, and there is now a sentencing trial going on to determine how long she should spend in prison, or if she could possibly have probation or a suspended sentence or just a fine, but I imagine this is prison. 3 men tried to take their own lives after being falsely accused of rape and trafficking. Now, this is a bit different from the Caroline Flack case. This is falsely accused. It's gone to court. These men went to court and she was the one found guilty. Or an investigation found that she was making it up and the police decided to take her to court instead. Now, of course, the CPS could have decided, oh, well, you know, women have got to be allowed to say these things. And if we bring these cases, then more women won't actually bring rape cases and we don't get enough rape cases coming through. I don't agree with that argument, but that is their argument. But in this case, this did go to court. She has been found guilty of trying to blame 8 different people of raping her or trafficking her, and she's been found guilty of perverting the course of justice. Eleanor Williams accused the men of attacking her and posted on Facebook in May 2020 that she was the victim of an Asian grooming gang. The 22-year-old of Barrow-in-Furness was found guilty of perverting the course of justice last month, or just a month before, January. Mohammed Ramzan said the lies had made his life hell on earth. 2 weeks after he was arrested following Williams' claims, he attempted to take his own life. It wasn't a case that he felt guilty. It was the impact of being lied about and the impact on his life because of those lies, because other people automatically believed this woman's lies, and it was all in the newspapers and it was all local, that he couldn't carry on, and he was innocent. Mr. Ramzan said his property had been damaged and his businesses had been ruined after he and his family were targeted in the most horrendous way. His family, I don't know whether he's married or whatever, or whether this is his parents and his wider brothers and sisters and whatever. Whoever it was, they were targeted. I have had countless death threats made over social media from people all over the world because of what they thought I was involved in. That's not him. That is a guy called Jordan Trengove. Said the word rapist had been spray painted across his house. He said he spent 73 days in prison sharing a cell with a convicted sex offender after he was charged as a result of this woman's claims. Things had calmed down a bit until the Facebook post in 2020. This made things even worse for me. There were big protests and marches in Barrow aimed at him. Protests and marches in the streets aimed at him, demanding whatever they would have been demanding. And possibly a load of #MeToo type of stuff going on, which is probably where all of this came from. The lowest point was when I tried to end my life in August 2020. Another one, Oliver Gardner, said his chance encounter with Miss Williams in Preston led to him being sectioned under the Mental Health Act. Mr. Gardner, who was accused of rape by her, said it was a real shock when he was contacted by Cumbria Police and told of her claims. He said it was just a case of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. He tried to end his life before being sectioned. Somebody else, falsely accused, totally innocent, accused of rape. Cameron Bibby, who was the first man accused of rape by Williams in 2017. So there's a history of this. This was 2017 versus 2020. He said he had to remove himself from most social media because of abuse, and he was scared to pick his son up from nursery because of the way people looked at him. This is her. I think this was from her Facebook post in May 2020. Williams' trial heard that police believed she inflicted the injuries on herself with a hammer. Imagine doing that. Now, I don't know how true that is. I mean, they believe she did it and she did it to herself, but I don't know. This is what the police said. I'm just reading what the BBC has written here. But this takes, if this is true, this takes a particular level of, I don't know, hate towards general men, is it? I mean, she's accused 8 people who are totally innocent. She's accused 8 of them of raping her. And then smashed herself up with a hammer, allegedly, in order to be able to make the claim to the police and get them arrested. She continues in her allegations against the various people in pretty much the same circumstances. The other bits on that story. False rape claim woman appeals against her conviction. How a woman's gang rape lies sparked outrage. Woman's hammer injuries a staged finale to her lies. I am not a psychopath, she says. Yeah, that's the sort of clown world of the UK at the moment, and none of it is funny. Whether it's Gary Lineker being unable to say stuff, whether it's Fiona Bruce having to pull back from a very good charity for a very good reason because the BBC forced her to say something to protect somebody who had hit his ex-wife and broken her nose. Whether it's a lady, whether it's a lady who commits suicide because she's been caught and cannot accept personal responsibility for her own actions, or whether it's a lady who falsely accuses 8 different men of raping her and goes so far as smashing her own face up in order to accuse them, in order to make it look like it was real. And then she gets caught, but then you find out what the actions of the consequences of false accusations against the men in a #MeToo environment where women are directly believed every time. Now, I know this particular case, this last case, is, I'm hoping this is an exception. I'm really hoping this is a major, major, major exception. But I haven't got a clue. I don't know anything about why are there only 5% or less than 10% of rape accusations actually continue and get through. I don't know. I don't know why. I know why people claim that's the case, and they claim it's misogyny by the police, and they claim it's a patriarchal society, and they claim that the world is just made for men. I don't think that's true. That's not true at all. Everybody tries to bend over backwards to make sure that if somebody's guilty, then we will go and get them. But we have to have evidence. We have to have something. There has to be something there. And if somebody's really good at being a criminal, yes, they can get away with it because they won't leave any evidence behind. But there is always that thing in the back of people's minds. Is this person not telling the truth? And the Western world has gone down this path. Believe all women. All women should be believed. And I don't know why we went down that path at all, other than this rape stuff where not enough men who were rapists were ending up in court at all. But my experience with women in my life is they certainly cannot be believed. I'm not saying the women who are raped and who bring cases to the police should not be believed, but in this one case, this woman went so far as to smash her own face in order to bring charges against 8 innocent men. And for what reason? What was she going to get out of it? Pity, sympathy, fame, 15 minutes in the news, on the newspapers. And if she had actually got away with this, would she now be smiling about how happy she was that these nasty bastards were in jail, despite the fact she knew they were innocent? I would like to say again that she still claims that her allegations are true. So I'm just taking off what the BBC has said, what the courts have found, what the police have found, and that could be incorrect. But 3 of those men tried to take their own lives because of what they say is false accusations, and what the courts believe and what the police believe were false accusations, because those have done the investigations. Anyway, that's the clown world. 4 pieces of absolute clown world of what we live in here in the UK, because nobody knows what's going to happen next. Nobody knows what they can say. Nobody knows how they can say it. Nobody knows if they're going to suddenly lose their job, get kicked out, get suspended because of either something that they do say because it's one of their principles, it's part of their life, or it's because their bosses told them that they had to say something. And how many people don't say anything at all, anywhere, because they fear that what they say, if it's based on their principles, they will get cancelled, they will lose their job.